The Elf and the Sunken Grove. The night was still, as if the stars themselves were holding their breath over the lake, known to few as the Whispering Depths. Elandriel, an elf with hair as dark as forest shadows, moved silently through the trees along the water's edge, her footsteps soft as the rustling of fallen leaves. She felt an unspoken draw, a soft beckoning that seemed to seep through the earth and the quiet of the evening. The lake stretched before her, silent and dark, its surface as smooth as glass, reflecting back the faint glimmer of the moon in silvery ripples. She knelt at the water's edge, fingertips grazing its cool surface. Legend spoke of a grove submerged deep within these waters, a place where her ancestors had once gathered to meditate on the wisdom of nature, to sing their enchantments to the stars. But that was in an age when trees still whispered ancient secrets, and magic flowed as freely as rivers through elven hands. Now, the grove had vanished beneath the lake, drowned by time and curse. Only faint tales remained, murmured by elders who spoke of the grove's fate with sorrow, as though its loss had drained something vital from their world. A chill ran through Elandriel as her eyes scanned the lake's surface. On this night she felt it clearer than ever. The call from beneath. It was no ordinary call, but a quiet hum, a tremor within her soul that she could not silence. She knew somehow that if she did not seek it now, the whispers would haunt her dreams and wakeful thoughts until her spirit was bound by their mystery. She had to answer. Elandriel closed her eyes, drawing upon the fragments of old elven magic she'd inherited, the faint spark that connected her to those who had come before. She whispered a prayer to the hidden grove, her voice soft as a breath on the night air. Ancestors of the depths, I hear your call. Grant me passage into the hidden heart of your grove. I seek only the truth you have left behind. Her words faded, dissolving into the silence, and for a moment all was still. But then a ripple appeared on the lake's surface, concentric circles widening slowly, almost lazily, as though the water itself was waking from a long slumber. The lake's depths seemed to stir, the blackness shifting to a faint, silvery glow beneath the surface, like veins of hidden starlight threading through the dark. Without hesitation, Elandriel stepped into the water, her slender frame sinking slowly as the chill crept up her legs, her waist, and finally to her shoulders. The lake swallowed her without protest, closing over her like the smooth, endless dark of a dream. A sense of otherness enveloped her, a sensation like slipping into another time, another life. She continued downward, her movements unhurried, as though guided by some unseen hand. The lake was darker than any night, yet Elandriel felt no fear. Shadows stretched and twined around her, deep as secrets, and she let them draw her forward. It was then she noticed them, shapes materializing through the haze of water, lines sharpening into silhouettes of branches and trunks, each ancient and twisted, each still and silent as the bones of giants resting in the deep. The grove had emerged, though its trees bore no leaves, and their branches lay heavy, as though bearing the weight of centuries lost. As she drifted through the grove, she felt a shiver pass over her skin, an awareness that eyes were watching, that whispers waited just beyond hearing. She touched one of the trunks, and a faint pulse of warmth greeted her fingertips, as if the tree recognized her touch. Glowing patterns emerged beneath her hand, the faint remnants of markings left by her ancestors. The light pulsed softly, like a heartbeat, and as she traced the patterns with her fingers, her mind filled with echoes of distant voices, low and indistinct, yet familiar. A voice seemed to rise from the water around her, no louder than a sigh. "Elandriel, you come for what was lost." The words drifted around her, filling her with a strange calm and a sense of belonging. She felt as though she was slipping back into the memories of another time, reliving the sensations and secrets of an age before hers. "I come to understand," she whispered, her voice melding with the shadows, her words resonating as though spoken by another. The whispers surged like wind through branches, stirring the depths around her. The grove had been waiting, and it seemed almost alive, as if ready to reveal what lay buried in its waters. Elandriel closed her eyes, letting the lake's chill settle over her, anchoring her to the quiet secrets, the half-formed memories that lay just beyond her reach. In that moment, she knew. She had found the entrance to a story lost to time, and she would not leave until she had unearthed its truth. As Elandriel drifted deeper into the Sunken Grove, the light from above faded entirely, leaving her wrapped in a velvet darkness. Yet within the depths, a strange luminescence began to emerge, subtle and elusive, like glimmers of starlight caught in the murky waters. It danced along the branches of the submerged trees, guiding her through the grove's spectral remains. Here and there, tiny beads of light clung to the bark, illuminating faint etchings, markings that pulsed as if they held breath. Each tree bore these delicate carvings, the faintly glowing symbols traced in intricate patterns. They reminded her of the ceremonial tattoos worn by the elders, marks of history and memory. These inscriptions had survived the weight of centuries and the curse that had drowned the grove, as though waiting for someone to finally heed their silent call. Elandriel reached out, her fingers brushing the cool bark of an ancient trunk, feeling an energy pulse beneath her touch. A whisper echoed in her mind, soft yet insistent, an echo from another time. The markings seemed to shimmer, rearranging themselves into words, flowing like water across the bark. The language was ancient, a form only half understood, but the message was clear enough to pierce through the veil of centuries. The grove was not taken by the waters alone. It fell to a shadow born of secrets too heavy for this world. Beware, child of the forest. What lies hidden here is bound to a curse. Elandriel felt a shiver spread through her as the words faded, merging back into the twisting lines on the bark. She looked around, taking in the grove's silent expanse, now imbued with a feeling that was both sorrowful and ominous. The trees stood like sentinels, guardians of a truth too dangerous to be known. She sensed that each was rooted in something beyond mere soil. They seemed tied to a realm that lay somewhere between life and death, past and present. With every step, she felt herself sinking not just into the grove, but into layers of memory, fragments of an ancient sorrow that had once rippled through her ancestors. The water grew colder, heavier, until it seemed to press upon her, each step harder to take, as though the shadows themselves resisted her presence. Yet she moved forward, drawn by the pull of something deeper, something waiting at the grove's heart. Through the haze, Elandriel noticed a break in the trees, a circle where the trunks curved inward, forming a hollowed sanctuary. As she entered, she felt a shift in the water's weight, and the shadows gathered thicker, as if this place held something more potent, more dangerous. And there, rising from the center of the grove, stood an enormous tree, larger and older than any she had ever seen. Its roots twisted like serpents, burying themselves into the dark soil, and its trunk bore no markings. Instead, it gleamed with a strange dark radiance that seemed to absorb the faint light around it, cloaking itself in mystery. Elandriel approached slowly, her eyes tracing the knots and whorls in the bark, searching for any sign, any message left by those who had come before. And then she saw it, a single line of text, inscribed not with the careful precision of other carvings, but with a rough, hurried hand, as though it had been written in desperation. Seek the Heartstone, where shadows end and light begins. Only with sacrifice shall the curse be lifted. The words rang in her mind, resonating with a weight that was both thrilling and terrifying. The Heartstone. She had heard tales of it in childhood, stories whispered in reverent tones by the fire. It was said to be an object of great power, forged by the first Elven beings to walk the earth, a relic of the old magic that had been lost over time. But the Heartstone was more than a legend. It was bound to their world and its fragile balance, as potent as it was perilous. Elandriel's fingers trembled as she touched the inscription. The moment her skin met the bark, the grove around her seemed to come alive. Shadows shifted, curling and weaving around the trees, forming half-visible figures, shapes of those who had lived and died here, whose spirits still lingered, bound to the grove by the same ancient spell that kept its secrets submerged. Their faces were indistinct, their eyes hidden, yet she felt their presence, their silent plea. They wanted her to find the Heartstone. The shadows grew denser, surrounding her, and Elandriel realized they were guiding her, pressing her toward the tree's base, where the roots opened into a dark, gaping hollow. With a deep breath, she knelt, peering into the hollow's depths, feeling a pull stronger than her own will, as though something within the grove's heart had begun to awaken, sensing her purpose. She hesitated, fear mingling with curiosity. But the spirits around her grew restless, their whispers rising in urgency, urging her to move forward, to descend into the shadows that held their ancient grief and their only hope of redemption. Taking a final breath of the cold, murky water, she slipped into the hollow, allowing herself to be swallowed by the darkness that awaited. The hollow descended deeper than Elandriel could have imagined. Shadows draped the walls of the narrow passage, winding downward, pulling her further from the quiet embrace of the lake above. Her breath felt like a whisper in the silence, and she clutched her hands to keep them from trembling. The darkness pressed in, dense and impenetrable, as though centuries of secrets had pooled here, filling every crevice, every crack in the stone. But as she moved deeper, a soft glow emerged, faint yet constant, illuminating the path ahead. The source was unclear, as if the light had no origin, simply seeping from the very walls. It pulsed rhythmically, like the heartbeat of the grove itself. Elandriel's steps slowed, and she began to feel the presence of voices, hushed yet potent, threading through her mind. They were familiar, these voices, a low, haunting chorus that seemed to echo from her deepest memories. They spoke in the old Elven language, their words flowing like water over ancient stones, soothing yet laced with sorrow. Elandriel paused, closing her eyes to focus on the words, to allow the voices to guide her. "Remember us, child of the forest," they murmured, their tones weaving together like the threads of an ancient tapestry. "We who were bound to this place, we who sacrificed to keep the darkness at bay." She felt a sudden weight on her chest, a pang of grief that was not her own, yet it resonated deeply within her heart. Her ancestors had once walked this very path, their fates entwined with the grove, bound by a magic both powerful and perilous. Elandriel realized she was not merely following their steps. She was reliving their memories, immersing herself in their long-buried fears, their desperate hopes. As she moved forward, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. Here, the light was brighter, bathing the walls in a soft, ethereal glow. Carvings lined every surface, etchings of elven faces with solemn expressions, their eyes gazing outward, yet somehow seeming to follow her as she moved. Each face bore a unique mark, a symbol of their place within the grove, of the duties and sacrifices that had defined their lives. In the center of the chamber stood a stone altar, and upon it rested a single item, a crystal vial containing a dark, swirling mist. Elandriel approached with reverence, sensing the power that radiated from it. Her ancestors' voices rose again, clearer this time, more insistent, as though the vial held their very souls. "We gave our lives to protect the Heartstone," the voices intoned, "binding ourselves to its power so that none who would seek its might for darkness could lay claim. To touch it, child, you must sacrifice as we have, for only the selfless may wield the gift of the Heartstone." Her hand trembled as she reached toward the vial, her fingers grazing the cool surface of the glass. The mist inside began to swirl faster, a tempest of memories and emotions. It was then she understood. The mist held fragments of her ancestors' lives, memories preserved in time, trapped within this crystal prison as a testament to their devotion. The voices shifted, taking on the tones of individuals, the voices of those who had once walked in flesh, each a distinct echo that bound her closer to her lineage. One voice spoke louder than the others, a deep, steady tone that she recognized instantly. It was the voice of her great-grandfather, a figure she knew only through stories, a guardian of the grove who had vanished many years before her birth. "Elandriel," the voice called, filling her mind with warmth and strength. "We watch over you. We have waited long for one with courage and the will to seek what is hidden. The Heartstone awaits you, but be warned, its power is not freely given. Only one who understands true loss may lift the curse, and that loss must be willingly borne." She hesitated, heart pounding. A great sadness filled her, and she could feel the weight of their sacrifices pressing upon her. This was no simple task, no ordinary journey. She was being asked to surrender something of herself, something irreplaceable as each of them had done. To find the Heartstone meant to leave a piece of herself behind, something she might never recover. "You must choose," her great-grandfather's voice continued. "The Heartstone will only reveal itself to those who give freely. The grove will test you, for it holds no mercy for those who seek without love." The voices faded, but their presence lingered, like shadows woven into the very walls. Elandriel stood before the altar, her heart racing, her mind filled with the gravity of the decision. She could feel the energy of her ancestors' souls entwined with the mist, binding themselves to the crystal in an eternal vigil. They had surrendered everything they held dear to protect this place, to keep the grove hidden from those who would exploit its power. And now, Elandriel understood the price. If she wished to reach the Heartstone, she too would have to surrender something of herself, a memory or bond as deeply cherished as life itself. She took a steadying breath, feeling the weight of their expectations, of her own resolve, as she prepared to face the trial awaiting her at the heart of the grove. Elandriel stepped forward, the faint glow of the chamber reflecting in her wide, uncertain eyes. The stone altar stood like a sentinel, silent and unyielding, its edges worn by time yet imbued with an ageless power. Her hand trembled as she reached for the crystal vial, the dark mist within swirling with an intensity that seemed to mirror her own apprehension. Her ancestors had set this trial in motion, a test that would allow only the worthy to approach the Heartstone. And now she was here, her path entwined with theirs, her destiny a continuation of the choices they had made long ago. With a deep breath, she lifted the vial, feeling its chill seep into her skin. The mist inside writhed, coiling and uncoiling like trapped shadows, and a whisper floated through her mind. A voice both foreign and familiar. It spoke of the Heartstone's power, of its promise to those who would sacrifice. The words echoed in her mind, carrying the weight of countless lives who had come before her. As she stared into the vial, a vision began to take shape, dim and hazy at first, then growing sharper until she saw herself as a young child. She was running through the forest, her laughter light and pure as she chased after her mother, who smiled warmly, guiding her through the trees. It was a memory she had held close to her heart, a moment filled with the warmth of love, the simplicity of joy. Then the vision shifted, and she saw her mother singing softly to her, a lullaby woven with words of comfort and ancient wisdom. The memory filled her with a bittersweet ache, for her mother had long passed into the realm of spirits, leaving Elandriel with only these precious fragments to cling to. It was this memory that had shaped her, grounded her in moments of loneliness and despair. And now, as she stood before the altar, she understood what the Heartstone demanded of her. Sacrifice the memory you hold most dear, the voice whispered, soft and insistent. To lift the curse upon the grove, you must relinquish that which ties you to the past. Only by letting go can you move forward. Only by freeing yourself can you inherit the grove's burden. Elandriel's heart twisted, and she closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision settle heavily upon her. The memory of her mother was all she had left of a love that had shaped her, a bond that had kept her grounded even in the darkest of times. To let go of it felt like tearing a piece of her soul away, as though she were giving up a part of her very identity. But the Heartstone pulsed softly within the vial, its light growing warmer, beckoning her to make the choice. The grove was waiting, its spirits holding their breath, their hopes and dreams resting upon her willingness to release what was most precious to her. They had each surrendered something dear. Each paid a price to keep the Heartstone hidden. And now it was her turn to prove her devotion. With a trembling breath, Elandriel raised the vial, her fingers tightening around the cold glass. The mist inside seemed to swirl faster, sensing her decision, and she felt a pang of grief, a sense of loss as sharp as any blade. Her mother's face lingered in her mind, a smile of warmth and comfort, a presence that had given her strength. "I release you," she whispered, her voice barely audible, her words laced with sorrow and resolve. "I let go, for the sake of the grove, for the ancestors who trusted me to protect their legacy." As the words left her lips, the mist within the vial grew blindingly bright, filling the chamber with a fierce light that seemed to burn through the shadows, casting them back into the depths. She felt the memory slipping from her mind, unraveling like threads loosened from a tapestry, leaving behind only a faint ache, a hollow space where once warmth and love had dwelled. In that instant, the vial dissolved into her hands, its contents spilling out like droplets of light, merging with the air around her. The grove responded, its trees stirring as though awakened from a long slumber, their branches stretching toward her in gratitude and reverence. The voices of her ancestors swelled, a chorus of approval and sorrow, their echoes wrapping around her, binding her to the grove spirit. And then, there it was, the Heartstone. It emerged from the shadows, suspended in a soft golden glow, its surface smooth and gleaming, filled with a light that seemed to pulse with life itself. Elandriel approached it slowly, her hand hovering above the stone, feeling its warmth radiate through her. She understood now. The Heartstone was not merely an object of power, but a vessel of memory, a living testament to those who had sacrificed to protect it. Her own memory had become part of its light, woven into its essence, a small fragment of her soul joined with those who had come before. With a reverent touch, she laid her hand upon the Heartstone, and a rush of warmth filled her, an understanding that transcended words. She had passed the trial, lifted the curse, and in doing so she had become a part of the grove's legacy. The ancestors' voices faded, leaving her in a profound silence, a peace as deep as the lake that held their secrets. The Heartstone glowed brighter, its light enveloping her, as if granting her the strength and wisdom of those who had once guarded it. She closed her eyes, feeling the grove's spirit settle within her, binding her forever to its ancient purpose, its timeless song of sacrifice and guardianship. As the light from the Heartstone enveloped Elandriel, a deep stillness fell over the grove, settling within her like the soft, enduring silence after snowfall. She felt herself merging with the essence of the grove, her heartbeat aligning with the gentle pulse of the Heartstone. It was as though the trees, the water and the spirits of her ancestors had woven themselves into her soul, and for a single breathtaking moment she sensed the full weight of their love and sacrifice. She was no longer just Elandriel, an elf on a solitary quest. She had become the new guardian, bound to the grove in ways beyond her understanding. Slowly, she lifted her hand from the Heartstone. The glow faded slightly, retreating into a quiet shimmer, yet it continued to radiate warmth and life. its purpose fulfilled and renewed. Elandriel felt an ache in her chest, an echo of the memory she had sacrificed, a warmth that was no longer hers, a melody she could no longer recall. The edges of the memory were hazy now, like mist rising from the lake in the morning light. But she held on to the feeling, a faint impression of love and comfort, enough to remind her of the cost and the honor of what she had done. Turning, she noticed the shadows around her beginning to dissolve, the shapes of the trees becoming clearer as though the very lake had shifted. Her ancestors' faces, once etched in sorrow, now softened, their expressions bearing a calm acceptance, a peace as deep as the roots of the grove itself. They faded slowly, their whispers growing faint, yet Elandriel felt their presence lingering, woven into the grove's essence, a part of the Heartstone and of her. With a steadying breath, she moved toward the path that would lead her back to the lake's surface. Her steps were slow, deliberate, as though she were emerging from a dream, each step pulling her farther from the world below. The grove seemed to breathe with her, its branches stirring in silent farewell. And as she ascended, the water grew lighter, shadows scattering like dust, leaving the path illuminated by a soft, ethereal glow. At last, Elandriel broke through the lake's surface, gasping as she emerged into the cool night air. She felt the weight of the water release her, leaving her lighter, transformed. Around her, the whispering depths were calm, their surface undisturbed, the stars reflected in their depths like scattered jewels. She rose to her feet on the shore, taking in the sight of the grove's reflection in the water, as if it were a world both distant and yet forever a part of her. In the silence of the night, she felt a presence beside her, a figure cloaked in shadow, ethereal and faint. It was her great-grandfather, his features softened, his eyes carrying the same warmth she had always imagined. He did not speak, but his gaze held gratitude, pride, and a hint of the sorrow she herself felt for the memory she had lost. He lifted a hand in blessing, and she nodded, understanding that she had done what was asked of her, that she had honored the legacy of her ancestors and lifted the burden they had carried. He faded into the mist, his presence merging with the trees, the water, and the earth, leaving her alone beneath the vast star-strewn sky. Yet she was not truly alone. She could feel the connection that bound her to the grove, a thread of light and memory that ran through her heart and soul, forever linking her to the ancestors and the spirit of the forest. As dawn broke over the horizon, the first rays of sunlight glinted off the lake, casting a golden hue over the trees, illuminating the waters that held the secrets of the past. Elandriel closed her eyes, feeling the grove's song within her, a melody that whispered of sacrifice, love, and renewal. She knew that, like her ancestors, she would carry this legacy, guarding the grove, honoring the Heartstone, and protecting the fragile balance between life and memory. She turned, leaving the whispering depths behind her, the Heartstone's light still faintly pulsing in her memory, its warmth a reminder of the unseen legacy she now carried. And as she walked into the forest, her steps sure and purposeful, she knew that the grove would live on, its secret safe, its spirit reborn in the heart of the new guardian.